the whole concept of Surgeon Simulator is it follows the trend of games where the controls are purposefully difficult and kind of wonky because it's funny if you role play as a bad surgeon, right? So it's not fun if you are a good surgeon and you can make very precise cuts and remove a heart and then stem the bleeding and then bring in a really nice preserved heart and then stitch it back together real good and everything works out great, right? Like that's super stressful. That's not fun. That's like actually being a surgeon, and people get paid really good freaking money to do that. And they go to school a long time. You don't want to play a game where you do that, right? So here's the thing. The way to make that fun is to have controls where your hand is like a floppy like thing that you kind of position your hand weird and it kind of extends out and you only have one hand at a time. You don't have two. And on a PC, this works pretty well because you can use different mouse buttons and then you move the mouse. Different combinations of mouse buttons and mouse movements basically allow you to move the hand around. So the concept here is you're given a body, and the body has an open cavity, right? And it's very cartoony. These are like cartoon bodies with like a chest cavity that's open, and you can see like the basic organs. And you're also given tools. So like you can grab a hammer to break the ribs in order to get at the lungs or the heart. You're given like a scalpel so that you can kind of like try to carefully disconnect the organs and try not to make the patient bleed too much. In this game, you're given syringes full of extra blood so you can give the patient extra blood. So if they lose too much blood, you can kind of fill them back up. Or there's another syringe that will stop the bleeding that is like a coagulator, I guess is what you would call it, right? And in Surgeon Simulator 1, it was very simple. It was just like, here's a scenario. Your job is to take out the heart and put another heart in without causing too much ridiculous extra bleeding. Go. That was it. Here's another scenario. Do this. Go. That's it, right? And you're super uncoordinated. And it was the kind of game you would bring your friends over and you would challenge them to sit in front of the computer screen without any prepping and say, here, use these really wonky controls and see if you can do this. And you just had to get close enough, right? Once you got that heart out of the chest, you just wanted to put the other heart back in. And it didn't matter how many other things that came out of the middle of that person's body. As long as you got the heart in, you're good. Like that's all that mattered.
You're hilariously incapable as the player character, but yes. How capable are you specifically in this game?
Oh, hilariously incapable also. So yes, this is the kind of thing where like, if you played it a lot, you could probably get really good at it, but it's very difficult because the controls are very hard. So that's where the game started. In the second version of this game, they've now taken this concept and they've built it out into more of an actual video game with a story. And that's what's interesting about the sequel, is that you are there's like this secret organization that you are a part of, and there's this woman who's walking you through the tutorial who's the head of this organization, and they're bringing you on and they're telling you like everything's going to be fine, we're bringing anybody can be a surgeon, blah 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 blah. And you get through the tutorial and you come to find out that there's a guy that like is talking to you through the vent and is like, don't listen to anything she says, she's lying. And like, but you still have to get through each of these like levels in order to go through the story where you are operating on Bobs, who are these like test patients. So there's kind of like a Portal-esque quality to, if you've played through any of the Portal games, where you get through each of these like little mini scenarios and you move to the next. But you're also uncovering what's actually going on in the facility as you go through it. You can play in modes with your friends where you are coordinating with each other. There are levels where you can actually design your own levels. Even in the story levels, it's not even just about the operation that you're doing on your patient. You might get to a place where you need a key card. So you need to go figure out how to get to the room with the key card in order to open the door to get to the patient. And then you get to the patient and you learn, oh, I have to break open the ribs, but I need something to break open the ribs with. Where can I go find something to break open the ribs with? And you're often given dilemmas, like you have a time limit, But you can do this the messy way, like in one of the tutorials, you can actually pull somebody's leg off just by pulling on their leg hard enough, and you can just yank the leg off. But that will cause lots of extraneous bleeding, and the patient can bleed out. Right. Or you can get a saw and like carefully line up the saw with like a connection point on the leg and saw the leg off, and then you're gonna have less bleeding because you did it in a more surgical manner, right? So they've expanded the original concept. You want the bad news?
Give me the bad news, Doc.
Okay. The bad news is...
Give it to me straight.
The bad news is, for the most part, all of that stuff works great on PC. There are some things that it doesn't clue you into well. Like, for example, when you're going through the tutorial and they're like, okay, good. Now go pick up the saw. And your patient's like bleeding and you have a certain amount of time before they bleed out. And you're like, okay, where is the saw? And you're looking around there. It's not like there's a light that shines down from the ceiling all of a sudden and goes like, boonk, the saw's over here. Like that sometimes is unintuitive. And you're like, okay, where is or like put the leg you just tore off the patient in the disposal. Where's the disposal? I just entered this room. I don't know where the disposal is. I have to go find it. And I'm limited for time. On top of that, she would just keep repeating the same line until you accomplish the thing. Put the leg in the disposal. Just put the leg in the disposal.
It's like anxiety producing.
Just put the leg in the disposal. My son and I were playing this together and I had to like watch my language. I was like, no freaking, yes, I know I have to put where's the freaking disposal? Where is it? To balance that stuff out, you can hit certain benchmarks. Yeah, benchmark. That's a good word. Benchmarks, which unlocks outfits or like funny hats that your character can wear, things like that. And the characters look funny. So that stuff's all fun. Like you unlock more stuff. And being that it's multiplayer, I could be the guy running around with a fishbowl in the 70s outfit, and you could be the girl running around in like the hazmat suit with the alligator head. Like totally awesome. Like we could look super weird together doing surgery. That's really fun. The worst news about all of this, playing Surgeon Simulator 2 with a controller is the worst experience I think I've ever had.
Challenge accepted.
It is terrible. It was so hard to just pick things up, like picking up a saw and trying to keep the saw straight in order to saw a guy's arm off was so hard. It's so different. With a mouse and keyboard, you line up the mouse and you move the mouse forward and back. It lines up really well. With thumbsticks, you line it up and you have to move the thumbstick forward and back. It's more nuanced, right?
Yeah,
it just isn't quite the same thing, right? And now all of a sudden you're chopping into the guy's head instead of his shoulder, and then you're like, oh, I just chopped the guy's head off. Oops,
And Bob's dead.
And Bob's your uncle. So just a reminder, we review out of 8 because it's pizza slices in a large pizza. So 7 out of 8 slices in a large pizza for PC, 4 out of 8, half of a pizza for console.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.